Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. With exports, GST collection, with PMI rankings and of course automobile sales all rising, and with an above average monsoon, the government believes it can see green shoots on the economic horizon. But does the picture look a little different when viewed through the lens of employment? After all, employment is what all of us actually care about. With me to discuss that subject is a gentleman that many believe is an absolute expert on employment in India, the CEO and Managing Director of the Center for Monitoring the Indian Economy, Mahesh Vyas. Mr. Vyas, before I come to the critical issues I want to discuss with you in this interview, let me ask you to briefly, in simple English, explain three terms which are bound to crop up in our interview repeatedly. They are the labor participation rate, the employment rate, and the unemployment rate.
The best way of addressing this is to start off by first understanding what is unemployment. What is a person to be defined? Who's a person to be defined as unemployed? A person is defined to be unemployed if such a person is willing to work and is actively looking for a job but does not find that job. So these are the unemployed. Now, if you add to those people who are employed, you get what is called as the labor force. This labor force, as a percent of all people who are of working age population, is the labor participation rate. So employed plus unemployed as a percent of total working age population, which is more than 15 years, is your labor participation rate. Now, if you take just the unemployed of these and divide it by the labor force, you get the unemployment rate. So only the unemployed as a percentage of the labor force is the unemployment rate. Now, if you take the employed as a percent of the working age population, then you get the employment rate. These are the three definitions which you were asking about.
Let's then begin by focusing on the unemployment rate, which for the month of September was 6.7%, and that's considerably better than the August figure of 8.4, or even the February figure just before COVID and the lockdown hit us, which was 7.7. The government takes great reassurance from this, but you pointed out that a falling unemployment rate at the same time as a falling labor force participation rate and a falling employment rate is not necessarily good news. Can you explain that to us, please?
So the unemployment rate was important in developed countries where most people who were of working age population went to work, and when they did not find jobs, there was macroeconomic stress. There was an indicator of macroeconomic stress. But that is a condition where all the people who should be working were working. But if you have got a low labor participation rate, like in India, then the proportion of those not finding jobs is not adequate. Let me give you an example of this number that you just related, that a falling unemployment rate. In the last month, in the month of September, the unemployment numbers came down, absolute numbers came down by 7 million. But 5 million found jobs. So what happened to the remaining 2 million? The remaining 2 million left the labor force. So although some people got jobs, others who did not find jobs actually left the labor force and shrunk the labor force as a whole. So the labor force shrunk by 2 million even when 5 million got jobs. What should have happened is, as more people find jobs, more people should come in looking for more jobs. But if the number of people looking for more jobs reduces, then I don't think that's a good way of saying that the unemployment rate has come down. Because the number of people looking jobs are discouraged. They say that there are no jobs available, so let's even give up looking for jobs.
So a falling labor force participation rate actually means that people are giving up looking for jobs, they're opting out, they're discouraged, and in a very real sense, they're saying to themselves, there isn't a hope for me. I'm therefore not even going to bother to look. Which is why, against that background, a falling unemployment rate is not necessarily good news, because actually an increasing number of people are simply giving up and opting out.
That's right.
Now, I noticed that in India, the labor force participation rate is under 41%. To be precise, it's 40.7%. But the global average for labor force participation is 66%. And that's a huge difference of just over 25%. Why is it so low in India?
I think the simplest answer to that question is because there ain't enough jobs. Mind you, even this labor participation rate, which is much lower than the global standards, consists largely of jobs in the unorganized sector on informal terms. So only around 20 to 25, less than 25% of the jobs are formal jobs of the kind that people would like to get. So if you have so few jobs available, so few good jobs available, then it is very evident that the country is not able to create enough jobs to bring people into the labor markets. They'd rather say that there are no jobs available. So what's the point of even declaring that we are looking for jobs? So it's the same story, that there are no jobs, therefore people are not coming in, they're getting discouraged and going away, and that is what keeps our labor force participation rate as low as 40%, 41%, so on and so forth, when the global number is close to 66%.
Now, this is a very important point you're making, and I think is one that the government should hear. That the fact that the unemployment rate may have fallen from 8.4 in August to 6.7 is not necessarily reason for cheer and celebration, because the labor force participation rate has also fallen, and it's actually fallen, if I recall correctly, from 43% in 2019-20 to 40.7% now. And that means an increasing number of people are disheartened, they've opted out, they don't believe there is a chance for them to get a job and are not looking. And this is what the government should bear in mind. Am I right in that summing up?
You are right. Yes, the government needs to worry about the fact that the labor participation rate is still falling and has fallen quite substantially. In fact, it fell very sharply. It has recovered, but the recovery seems to have stagnated. I think the government and we in India as a whole need to worry very seriously that it is not the unemployment rate that is important, it is the labor participation rate that is important, it is the employment rate that is important. It is important that more people have opportunities to work and be productive, rather than we look at a number. Traditionally, we saw a number like 2 to 3% people being unemployed only. At least now we say it is 6 to 7%. But even that is not a good story, because we require more people to participate in the labor markets.
As you said, the government should focus on the labor force participation rate, which is falling, rather than the unemployment rate. You also said the government should focus on the employment rate. And for the sake of the audience, I'll point out that the employment rate in 2019-20 was 39%. It's down. It's 38% at the moment. It hasn't risen. And that's another area of concern for the government. Am I right?
That's right. Just imagine that 1 to 1.5% of the working age population, which is 1 billion people, 1 to 1.5% of that have gone out of employment. They had jobs in 1920 and they do not have jobs today. That's quite a big hit. So if you look at absolute numbers, you don't get this, because you also got to take into account that the labor force, the working age population itself is also rising. So we need to take that into account. Without taking that into account, you are not getting the numbers right. So I think the employment rate is very important.
Now, one of the things we pointed out, and it's a big difference between India and the global average, is the fact that our labor force participation is just 40.7%. Globally, it's around 66%. But there's a second feature hidden within India's labor force participation rate, and that is the female labor force participation. According to the government's own statistics, between 2011, 2012, and 2017, 2018, the female labor force participation rate fell 8% to 23%. But your organization, the Center for Monitoring the Indian Economy, believes it's actually as low as 11%. And this compares with rates of 30% in Bangladesh, 39% in Indonesia, 45% in Thailand. Why is our female labor force participation so much worse than countries like Bangladesh, our neighbor?
We've got to worry about that very seriously. And the last time we had a public debate around female labor participation rate, Government economists were aggressive in saying that the CMI numbers cannot be right because we cannot be as bad as other countries which have such low labor participation rate. But today, if you go to the ILO's website, the World Bank's website, and look at their international comparison, according to them, the ILO model says that the female labor force participation rate in India is 20%. And that is amongst the 7 or 8 worst countries in the world. We are in the company of Iran, Iraq, Yemen, Syria, the kinds. Pakistan is 22% according to the ILO model. So it's now kind of accepted, and even the government's own numbers show that the female labor force participation rate is falling. We are saying it is a lot lower than what the government official systems are telling us. So I think we're going to take this really very seriously. Why is the female labor force participation rate in India so low? And why are we willing not to even accept this fact, let alone doing something about it?
What's your answer to that question? Why is it so low in India? Is there a brief answer?
Well, there are many academics who have tried to study this problem, and I would draw upon them to understand this. So many have explained, and this is a global phenomenon, but these are all written off in a sense, that as the income rises of a country, the female labor force participation rate initially declines, and then as it continues to rise, the female labor force participation rate increases again. I think India has been in this decline for far too long and is not seeing the uptick again as it should have by now. The second point they make is that as the country keeps growing its per capita, women prefer to spend their time more in higher education, and therefore their participation in the labor markets get delayed. But this was a story 10, 15 years ago. They have finished their higher education. They should have been in the labor market, and yet the labor force participation rate continues to decline. I think the problem is more to do with many other things that we are not adequately taking into account. One recent research pointed out that women find the wages to be so low that they prefer to spend their time into investing in their children, who, if educated well, can get better wages for the family. So this is a kind of an optimization of their time. Rather than get a little money now, it's better to invest your own capital into getting more money later on. I think it's a very wise move. It's a good piece of research, but that's not adequate. I think the problem is to do with things like safety at work. It is to do with things like safety in transportation to and back from work. I think these factors play a big role. There is still a cultural problem in India that we do not see enough opportunities being given to women, or we don't even see women going out to work with the same acceptance as we see men going out to work. So I think this is a complex problem, too many factors, but I think the income factor, the education factor has played their role out. We need to focus on cultural issues, safety issues, better infrastructure, street lights, transportation. These things matter a lot.
Would I be right in saying that we will not be in a position to encash the demographic dividend that we talk so much about unless the female labor force participation is very, very considerably increased? Otherwise, we will soon find that that dividend becomes a drag.
The dividend can become a disaster if you don't tap into this additional labor force. So just look at this. The number of men who are employed is of the order of 355 million. The number of women who are employed is just about less than 50 million, 45 million or so. If we raise that 45 million women working to, let us say, even 200 million, because the global labor participation rate for women is less than 50. So if we take our 10 to 11% to around, let's say 40% or so, and get 200 women working at 10,000 rupees per month, we're talking about adding a huge amount to our GDP. If you do that, that's a demographic dividend. Additional markets, more savings, more growth rate for the economy as a whole. We are missing out all that by not bringing the women into the labor force.
Let's at this point focus somewhat in particular on what has happened to jobs during the lockdown, which began, as you know, on the 24th, 25th of March. Now, in 2019-20, India had a total employment count of 403 million. Your organization has established that in April, initially, 121 million jobs were lost. But subsequently, some 14 million were added to farming and a further 7 million to small business. As a result, today, the total job loss is roughly 5.8 million. Does that mean that when you look at the big picture, and I'm talking about the big picture, employment levels have more or less gone back to what they were pre-COVID, pre-lockdown?
Well, we have regained a lot of the jobs, that is true. There was a very severe hit in April. Yes, 121 million jobs were lost, and many of them have come back, or most of them have come back. But I think that's not a satisfactory achievement, I may call it as that. So we lost a very large number of jobs because these jobs are all informal sector. They're all unorganized jobs. They are jobs like I go to the end of the street to sell bananas down the street. There's a lockdown. I can't go there anymore, and I do not know when I'll be able to go there again. So my job is lost. And there is no recourse that this person has to the job lost, which is very unlike, say, you and I losing jobs. When we don't lose jobs. We temporarily don't go to work in that period, but then go back to work when the lockdown is lifted. But most of these people, of the 121 million jobs lost, 91 million jobs were in the informal sector, unorganized people, those kinds of people. Many of them migrated to their farms and declared themselves as farmers, and therefore you say that 14 million jobs were gained in the farm sector. That's all disguised unemployment.
Okay, I take your point that therefore the assumption that just because the overall job loss at the moment is 5.8 million compared to 121 in April doesn't necessarily mean that we've gone back to pretty close to pre-COVID levels, because a lot of people have suffered, a lot of people may not have got jobs back, and a lot of them, if they have got jobs, have got very bad jobs. But it's when you turn to salaried employment that you actually become aware of the devastation that has happened in terms of employment during the lockdown. I gather your organization has established that 21 million salaried jobs were lost. What percentage of total salaried jobs is 21 million?
So it's 21 million jobs lost out of total is 403 million jobs. So that's about 5%. That's not much. But 21 million jobs lost of all salaried jobs, which is 87 million, is a lot more. So you're talking about nearly 30% of the salaried jobs getting lost. So that, I think, is the problem with the recovery that you mentioned in the earlier question, that we lost 121 million jobs. The loss now is only 5.8 million. That's true. But 5.8 million jobs lost on a net basis, but 21 million jobs lost among salaried people. That means that the good quality jobs have gone, and you have the jobs of farmers increasing, which is mostly disguised unemployment.
Sure.
So this is the problem, that the real good quality jobs have not all, but largely gone, and the, into quotes, not so efficient quality jobs have remained.
In fact, when you drill down further into salaried jobs, you discover that the single biggest sector that has suffered the most are white-collar jobs, white-collar professionals such as engineers, physicians, teachers. Here, 6 million such jobs have been lost, amounting to 31% of white-collar professional jobs. Now, that is actually a very substantial number, and it would affect a lot of people.
The salary jobs are of many kinds. They include industrial workers, white-collar workers, clerical staff, support staff, managers, and the kinds. Now, till we didn't get these numbers that you just quoted, we were under the impression that the job losses are likely to be mostly in support staff who have moved to farmlands. And it's unlikely that the better quality jobs of professionals are being lost. But when the wave of survey got completed after August, we discovered to our dismay that the biggest losses were in the best quality jobs, which is those of engineers, analysts, professionals, those kinds. And this is a fairly large chunk of all salaried jobs, which is a bit stressful. We found that very surprising, but the numbers are very clear that the biggest loss among salaried jobs is of the professionally qualified kind of people like engineers and accountants and lawyers and so on and so forth.
Now, if white-collar professionals is the biggest category within salaried jobs that have suffered, the second biggest category, as you pointed out a moment ago, are industrial workers. 26% of their jobs also have been lost. And here your organization points out that the worst hit has been in small industrial units. And I take it that's because MSME bore the brunt of the lockdown. Am I right?
That's right. The MSME bore the brunt of the lockdown. But I think you should see the loss of the earlier category and the industrial engineers category together. So the earlier category where we lost 6.6 million jobs is of engineers. Those cut across the shop floor and offices. So industrial workers are a big loser. Engineers are a big loser as well. And so are people like other professionals like accountants and the likes. So you have finance people and accountants in all kinds of firms. So I think it is the MSME which is the biggest loser. The smaller companies that are the biggest losers. They lost engineers, they lost industrial workers, they lost accountants, they lost all kinds of people. Even if you look at the listed companies' results and see where the wages have fallen,
okay,
it is not the top decile. The top decile is relatively safe. Everyone else has seen a 15, 20, 25% fall in wages. The top decile has seen only a 0.5% fall in wages. So the problem is all in the smaller companies.
Now, in fact, there is one sector of salaried jobs that have actually survived unscathed, intact. And that is, in fact, what you call white-collar clerical staff, secretaries, office clerks. How do you explain the fact that here they've survived almost intact?
Karan, to get an answer to why, it requires a lot more digging, analysis to find out why did this happen, to see many kinds of things. But I can make one comment on this, that the clerical staff did not see a fall. And that kind of surprised us still. I can conjecture that a lot of them have retained their jobs because of work from home and because many of them belong to the larger companies. Where do you find clerical staff today? You will not find clerical staff in an MSME. You do not find clerical staff in small companies. They have shrunk all that. Clerical staff is largely a phenomenon of large companies. They require clerical staff. Clerical staff are in government companies. PSUs will have large clerical staff. Banks will have large clerical staff, and banks have not suffered. Okay. So I think work from home and clerical staff largely belonging to larger companies is what has probably saved their jobs.
Now you make two more important points about salaried jobs. First of all, you point out that salaried jobs are not easily lost, but equally and perhaps more importantly, once lost, they're pretty difficult to retrieve. Does that mean that many of these people, white-collar professionals or industrial workers who've lost their jobs, and we're talking of 10, 15 million people, will find it very difficult to get a second job?
I think they will find it very difficult. It's the most stressful thing for these white-collar jobs, these salaried people finding their jobs again. Mind you, most of them in the last nearly 2 decades found their best job as placement in their business schools or their engineering schools. And if you don't get a placement, you are in an extremely difficult position. But once you get a placement, you hang on to that, and then you get another job, then you get a better job, and that's how your career progresses. Now, what happens to these people who have lost their jobs? They don't have an anchor to go back to get the jobs. There is no placement agency, there is no placement place in their company. So I think this is very, very stressful. Companies are not going to hire very easily. And these people who lost their jobs are going to compete with new cohorts that come in. The next batch is going to come in. They're going to compete with them. It's very difficult for salaried employees to get jobs after they lose one.
The second point you make is that the majority of salaried jobs are urban based. And that means, I presume, that this will have a huge adverse impact, A, on middle class households, and secondly, it would have a huge impact on urban demand and urban economies.
That is true. The urban employment scene is much, much worse than the rural areas. Rural areas have gained because the farming sector is doing well and Manrega is helping out in a big way, but there's nothing equivalent for urbanites. And that's where jobs are getting lost, and that's where demand is shrinking, and therefore corporates, the FMCG companies are saying that rural India will lead the recovery way out. I think that's stretching a bit too far, but nevertheless, urban India is a washout. They've lost jobs and demand is going to shrink from there.
Now, the government has launched what it calls the Atma policy. How much of an impact will that have on creating the sort of jobs we're talking about which have been lost?
Well, first of all, the Atmanirbhar Abhiyan Yojana was launched far too late. The lockdown was announced in the last week of March. The biggest impact was in April, and that's where we wanted government to be around to bail out those people who were most severely affected. But the government announced this Yojana in May, and that too not in early May, it was in middle to late May. So it came in too late. And then it did not offer any stops. It did not put enough money on the table to say that I'm going to bail out people. That part was too small. The largest part of Atmanirbhar Abhiyan Yojana was that it would make available finances to MSME in terms of cheap loans. But that's saying that when businesses are largely unable to find customers, when demand has shrunk, contracted in a big way, they're not looking at taking loans to grow. They want a more clear bailout. Getting indebted, no matter how easy the loan would be, would only ruin their reputation, their credit scores for tomorrow, because if they defaulted, the next loan would be bad. So I think Atmanirbhar Abhiyan Yojana got it wrong, and I don't think it's going to help much in growing employment.
In fact, speaking to the Indian Express just about a week ago, you said, and I'm quoting you, I have a one-line answer. Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan does not help save jobs, does not help create jobs. You stand by that. It will not have a substantial, leave aside major impact on jobs.
I stand by that. That statement was not a slip. I stand by that completely. Giving cheap loans is not a solution. Saying that global tenders is not allowed, indicating that we are not very happy with globalization, is not a way out in today's world to come out of the current mess that we are in.
Now, one more question about jobs. How many jobs does India need to create every year to ensure that all the new people entering the labor market get jobs? And are we making that target or are we missing it?
This question requires to be answered in two ways. One is the usual way, that how many people of more than 15 years of age come into the labor markets, then you discount for the labor participation rate, and then you say that this is what you require. Now, if you do that, you require about of the order of 7 to 8 million jobs, maybe a little more, to meet this flow, so to say. But I think what's important is for us to raise the labor participation rate, as we discussed earlier. So if we require to raise the labor participation rate, if we require all the women to join the labor force and enthuse them to join the labor force, we require to create jobs. Then I think the need for creating jobs is a lot more than the 7 to 8, 9 million jobs that we usually require to take care of the additional flow.
And how many jobs are we creating on average per year over the last 2-3 years?
Practically nothing. So we have been tracking employment since 2016, and employment has remained stagnant. There's no perceptible significant increase in employment right from 16 till 20. Earlier, if you look at the NSSO's numbers, we saw even then employment was not increasing. Only in the 90s till the 2011, that NSSO period showed a 1.3% increase in employment in those days. When the economy was growing at 6.5% per annum, when population was growing at 1.9% per annum, employment was growing at 1.3% per annum. And after 11-12, that story I just told you is 11-12, after that, employment has not grown.
You're saying something that is actually going to shake people. You're saying, first of all, for the last 3 years, 4 years that your organization has been tracking employment has been stagnant. There has been no growth in employment, which means that the necessary growth that is required, 7-8 million jobs a year, as you said, some others put it at 9 million jobs a year, that is not happening. So the new entrants each year into the labor market are not getting jobs because the job situation is stagnant. It also means something else. It means that if we have aspirations to move the labor force participation from 40.7, which is what it is today, to the global average of 65-66%, we're not going to do it. Because if we can't create enough jobs for the 7-8 new people entering the market each year, we certainly haven't got enough jobs to push up the LPR to 66%. We're missing out on both.
You're right. I'm not the first one to say that this is a jobless growth. A lot of people have said that India is witnessing what is called as a jobless growth. We are now veering towards saying that we are seeing growth with jobs declining. So we may still say we are growing at 4% and still have a situation where employment has grown. There's something weird in this. There's something which does not connect. You cannot have 2 decades of employment stagnation and still have an economy growing at even 6%. That's something is implausible over here. We are not creating enough jobs, and I suspect we are not growing our GDP as much as we say we are growing.
So then, hidden in what you're saying are 2 conclusions, and I want to ask you if I'm correct in drawing them out. That if we aren't creating enough jobs, if that 7 to 8 million new entrants into the labor force, into the job market each year don't get jobs, then A, your unemployment rate is going to continue to rise. And secondly, the labor force participation rate is likely to further dip because people will continue to get disenchanted and opt out. If you can't get a job, people say to themselves, well, if I can't get a job, I'm not going to keep looking for one. Why should I keep knocking my head on a wall? And therefore, both those problems will get worse. They're not going to get better.
That's right. The situation is getting worse, and therefore you will see increasingly governments, whether it is the current government or the previous governments, have all had to increasingly rely upon transfers. So whether it is a Manrega or it is some unilateral transfers to farmers or some other means, it could be in kind, it could be in grain, it could be in an LPG cylinder, but households are relying, because they can't, are relying less on wages and relying more on transfers. That is what's going on right now. So how do you connect the story of no employment and growth and not seeing people fighting on the streets? It's because government transfers are increasing.
Let me then at this point put to you the issue or question I raised in the introduction. I said in the introduction that the government looks at GST collections, exports increasing in the month of September, PMI rankings, which they say are the highest they've been for the last 8 years, as well as, of course, automobile sales, and say to themselves, there are green shoots on the economic horizon. They look at the above average monsoon and they say we're going to have a very productive Kharif harvest. The green shoots are going to grow. On the other hand, as you just explained, we have a dire employment situation. We simply do not have jobs for the 7 or 8 million who enter the labor market each year. That's adding to unemployment. It's going to have an impact on the labor participation rate because it will depress it. Therefore, do you believe these green shoots are genuine, or do you believe that the employment situation ensures that the problem we face continues, if not gets worse?
Well, I'll not deny that there is an improvement in the PMI, or there's an improvement in the GST collection, or that electricity generation numbers are looking good, or movement on railways, for example, is looking better than earlier. You can call them green shoots as well, but does it mean that this is going to be a flourishing economy soon? No, that's not the case. We have seen many green shoots in the past. Almost every season we see green shoots. I don't think the Ministry of Finance put together, the Government of India put together, has not at least once every quarter or at least once in 6 months said we can see green shoots. But, and those green shoots are not lies. And those green shoots are really something is happening somewhere, but that's not enough. So even today, the economy is at a much lower level than what it was earlier. And no economist today is saying that we are going to turn this around very easily. All forecasts are close to now double-digit negative. So, yes, there are some indications of things improving, which means that we are not going further down. We are not going further down into a mess. We are holding on to where we are. That's hardly sufficient.
But the main point you're making is until you can create jobs for people who need them, you're not going to really get back to those 7 and 8% levels of growth that we aspire to. If people don't have jobs, and worse still, if the labor force participation rate dips because people have given up looking for jobs, that gap between where you are and the 7 and 8% growth where you want to get to, that gap will remain or even get worse.
Yes, and what's happening in the recent times is that as growth is inadequate, as jobs are inadequate, most importantly, as jobs are inadequate, political pressures on reservations go up. That's an indication that jobs are not rising, that those government jobs are really very poor, low in numbers, but still there is pressure on that. Every state election is accompanied by all political parties saying that we will guarantee you jobs when we come to power. That means it's a very important issue, even now. When they come to power, they are broke and don't have money, so they do increasingly transfers. So if we want to stop ourselves from going down this path of increasingly relying on transfers, we have to see the bigger problem that no jobs is a crisis, not about losing the demographic dividend, but it is a crisis. You can't do these transfers beyond a point.
2 questions before I end this interview. Everything that you've said, the analysis that you've given me conclusively suggests, actually I'll go stronger, conclusively says that Mr. Modi has not delivered on that promise of 2 crore jobs a year.
If there was such a promise made by him, yes, he has failed to deliver.
And the second question, which is my last question, the government has just legislated new labor laws. And these, the government believes, will change the very nature of employment. People have picked up, in particular, permission to hire and fire for companies that employ under 300 people. Do you believe that these new labor laws will facilitate the creation of a lot of jobs? Or is that unlikely because other hurdles like land acquisition, the cost of electricity, tax terrorism, governmental red tape, all of those still remain? So have the problems that are holding back job creation been removed with the new labor laws? Or are there other problems that still need to be tackled and therefore we're not going to see a great burst of new jobs?
Well, firstly, I wouldn't like to dismiss the new labor laws. There are many good things in it which should help. But even if you made, there could be some flaws in it, but even if you made really the best labor laws, and let's say we have made the best labor laws, it's not adequate. It's not only about the laws. So it is about something else. It is about many more problems. It's about how much does India really value entrepreneurship? How much does India say that we want large companies, we want companies to become very big and want them to provide very good quality jobs? How much does India say that ease of doing business is not merely a rank, but is a lot more than that, to promote entrepreneurship on a large scale amongst very large number of entrepreneurs? Till we can't get that, we cannot solve the problem of jobs in India. It is not possible for mere laws to solve that. India needs to welcome entrepreneurship, needs to welcome capitalism on a large scale much more aggressively than it seems to be doing.
That, I think, is a very clear answer, Mr. Vyas. Thank you very much for explaining the employment situation. Thank you very much for also showing that when you look at the green shoots that the government claims are emerging through the prism of employment, they don't look so green, they don't look so big, they don't necessarily hold out that much hope. I'm very grateful for this interpretation. Thank you very much indeed. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you.